My name is Ethan, and my life is a relentless race at the marketing agency where I work. Every day, I wake before the sun, the alarm blaring like a shout, and drag myself from bed, wrapped in a blanket of insecurities and expectations. My dark roast coffee is my ritual, an attempt to awaken not just my body, but my mind as well. As the water bubbles, I gaze out the window of my small Bushwick loft. The city still sleeps, but I'm already on my way to another day at the office, where every corner is a reminder of the pressure I feel under the demanding gaze of Olivia, my boss. Olivia, at 35, is the director of marketing. To many, she is a successful woman, respected and admired, but to me, she is almost untouchable. Her presence is like a passing storm, imposing and terrifying. The image I have of her is cemented by respect and fear. Watching from a distance, amidst meetings and discussions, I can't help but feel that the distance between us is an insurmountable barrier. She moves with a confidence I envy, while I feel like a mere spectator in the audience of this play where she is the star. In the days that follow, I am surrounded by charts, spreadsheets and deadlines, always under Olivia's watchful eye. Our interactions are brief, often marked by critical comments and glances that seem to penetrate directly into my soul. "Ethan, this needs to be done before the deadline. We cannot afford to fail," she says in a meeting, her voice firm and authoritative. The pressure tightens like a noose around my neck, and doubt seeps into me. What if I'm not enough? Today, there's an electricity in the air. A work flight awaits us, a trip that promises to be decisive for our team. As I prepare, I feel a mix of anxiety and expectation. The whole day feels like an introduction to what's to come. The coffee I brew in the office kitchen is a small comfort, but it also serves as a moment to observe Olivia. She moves through the space with a certainty that makes me feel small. "Ethan, could you bring those reports to the meeting?" she asks me, and her voice echoes in my heart like a command. "Of course, Miss Hayes," I reply, but my tone is lower than I would like. Every word we exchange is charged with a palpable tension, and I wonder if I could ever see her as something beyond the perfect image everyone else has of her. As I arranged the documents on my desk, a feeling that something was about to change permeated the air. The office, with its white walls and the constant sound of keyboards and printers, transformed into a battlefield. Every day, every meeting, every interaction became a constant struggle between the desire to be noticed and the fear of not being enough. The thought that perhaps Olivia too was a prisoner of her choices began to infiltrate my mind. The loneliness I saw in her eyes, even when she was surrounded by people, was a mystery that intrigued me. When we finally boarded the plane, the outside world seemed to disappear. The cabin was a confined space where the formality that had always separated us dissolved a little. As I looked out the window, watching the clouds approach, a thought hit me. This trip could be the turning point in my career, or my end. The uncertainty I felt was like a storm inside me. Looking at Olivia, I realized that both she and I stood on the brink of change, and what would happen next was still unwritten. As the plane flew towards its destination, my heart pounded as if in a race, and anxiety consumed me. Looking at Olivia, seated in front of me, I felt the pressure of the situation. She seemed so focused on her laptop, analyzing data and graphs that existed only in her mind, that she forgot I was there, a few feet away, my thoughts swirling. At the same time, I admired her determination. It was as if she were on a mission, and I was just a spectator in her world of achievements and challenges. Our relationship until now had been marked by formality. I remembered my first interview at the company as if it were yesterday. I was so nervous I could barely speak. Ms. Hayes asked incisive questions. Her firm voice and penetrating gaze kept me on high alert. When she asked that last question, something inside me recoiled. Why do you think you deserve this job? In that moment, I felt like a small bird about to be swallowed by a predator. I managed to stammer out a few words about my background and my desire to learn, but deep down, the answer I wanted to give was that I just wanted to be seen. Time passed, and with each new task, I found myself molding my life around her demands. What should have been a gratifying job became increasingly draining. The feeling of being in Olivia's shadow was growing. She, always so perfect, while I struggled just to be recognized. I watched colleagues admire her, whispering about how competent she was, and with every compliment, I felt more invisible. Now, amidst this journey, I couldn't help but recall the moments that solidified Olivia's image as a difficult, untouchable boss. A month ago, in a crucial meeting, she had called me out in front of everyone. Ethan, you need to understand that the presentation you gave left much to be desired. We cannot afford to fail. You need to be better, she said, leaving no room for argument. That day, my self-esteem plummeted. As soon as the meeting ended, I went to the restroom, and looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a man who felt smaller than he truly was. Yet amidst all that pressure, sometimes small signs of Olivia's humanity revealed themselves. A gesture here, a word there, that I couldn't understand at the time. One day, while we were organizing an event, she helped me carry some boxes. I saw her genuinely smile, and for a brief moment, the armor she wore seemed lighter. Life isn't just about numbers, Ethan, she said, looking out the window. Sometimes we need to remember what truly matters. In that instant, I realized that behind that iron woman, there was someone who also fought her own insecurities. Sometimes it is in vulnerability that we find the strength to love, I thought, reflecting on how lonely Olivia seemed. I wanted to get closer, but I didn't know how. The workplace, with its competitiveness and intrigues, made me insecure. Would she ever know that I admired her not just as a boss, but as a woman who fought her own battles? The distance between us was an abyss I didn't know how to cross. As the plane approached our destination, I felt that something was about to change. The tension between us was palpable. Olivia, though focused on her work, couldn't ignore the fact that we had spent hours together in a confined space, away from the daily distractions. When the plane landed and we returned to reality, I realized that the dynamic between us might have changed forever. In the following days, the routine returned to normal, but now I felt as if there was a new layer to our relationship. Olivia continued to be demanding and critical, but there was a faint touch of humanity I had never noticed before. Instead of feeling merely like an assistant, I began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, I could be something more to her. The desire to get closer became an internal struggle. What would happen if I took a chance and saw her as more than just a boss? The fear that she wouldn't reciprocate that feeling was a weight I carried. One day, looking around the office, I noticed the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Conversations among colleagues were now more laden with whispers and speculation about the relationship between us. "Did you see how Olivia looked at Ethan in the meeting?" someone would comment. "I think they're getting closer." The laughter and teasing were constant, and it left me feeling even more deeply insecure. Was I truly being watched? What would this mean for us? As the weeks passed, the struggle between my admiration for Olivia and the fear of exposing myself intensified. Every interaction became a delicate dance, where I was acutely aware of every word and gesture. Quick conversations morphed into moments heavy with unspoken tension, and the line between professional and personal began to blur. The idea that Olivia might be more human, more vulnerable, started to consume me. But there was still a part of me that wondered if she had already perceived the battle I waged internally. The proximity I felt to Olivia was frightening, yet awakening. It was as if, while we struggled in different worlds, she too was trapped in a loneliness that resonated with my own. And so, as the office routine continued, I wondered if one day we would have the courage to see each other beyond our roles, if we could find a safe space to share, not just our challenges, but also our fears and longings. Perhaps we could discover a love that would free us from the chains that bind us. What would the future hold for us? The flight for the meeting did not go as planned. The turbulence began subtly, a gentle sway that soon escalated into a full-blown nightmare. When the seatbelt sign illuminated, a wave of panic washed over me. The pilot announced we were facing technical difficulties, and suddenly the plane seemed to be in freefall. Fear took hold, and what was merely a business trip converted into a life-altering experience that would change us forever. Olivia, with her focused, authoritative gaze, immediately began to organize the team. "Pray if you believe in anything, but let's prepare for the worst," she said, her voice firm, yet with an edge of anxiety I'd never heard before. The familiarity of her boss-like demeanor mingled with a glimpse of vulnerability I hadn't known existed. As the masks we wore daily crumbled, the reality that we were facing something truly dangerous became starkly clear. The sirens blared and the plane violently swayed. I clung to my seat, my heart pounding. Looking at Olivia, I realized she was just as frightened as I was. We were both prisoners of our situation, forced to confront the possibility of the end. "Ethan, we need to help each other, stay calm, and think of a plan," she said, her voice trembling, yet resolute. It was astounding how pressure could reveal the true essence of people. When we finally managed to make an emergency landing on a deserted island, the adrenaline still coursed through my veins. The plane was damaged, but we had made it out alive. The stark reality of our predicament settled in when we realized we were completely alone, far from everything, with no contact to the outside world. Fear and uncertainty swirled around us, yet at the same time there was a strange current of relief, knowing we were together, away from the rigid expectations and critical eyes of the office. The beginning was marked by a forced formality. Olivia and I exchanged nervous glances, each a silent battle to maintain the facade of hierarchy that had always existed between us. "Let's build a shelter and find water," I suggested, a desperate attempt to anchor us in some semblance of logic. Olivia nodded, and we began to work in concert, a forced collaboration that felt light years away from our usual dynamic. Building a shelter amidst the wild nature was an arduous task. The scorching sun baked our skin, and the scarcity of resources became acutely evident. But even in the midst of the chaos, an emergent connection began to form between us. Every movement, every shared effort seemed to chip away at the walls that separated us. I noticed Olivia's expression soften, and then, in a moment of sheer exhaustion, she cut her hand while trimming a leaf. "Ow! Ethan, could you help me?" she asked, and the sheer vulnerability in her voice was a physical blow. As I drew near, the invisible wall that had always stood between us simply dissolved. Carefully, I examined her arm and the shallow wound. "It's just a scratch, Olivia. You'll be fine," I reassured her. The brush of our hands as I tended her wound was electric, and a quiet, heavy with unspoken truths, settled between us. It was as if, in that precise moment, the careful defenses we'd both spent years building simply crumbled away. At the end of the day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and rose, we sat together on a log, exhaustion momentarily overshadowing our dire situation. Olivia looked at me, and for the first time, the formidable image of my director seemed to simply melt into the setting sun. "Ethan, you always see me as this strong woman, but sometimes I feel so utterly fragile." Her words, so raw and exposed, surprised me. "Me too," I confessed, the words a whisper. "Sometimes I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, not quite enough." The conversation flowed naturally, every word a tentative step towards something we'd both been so desperately avoiding. Between nervous laughter and gazes that held an unsettling sincerity, I realized that in this isolated place, we were finally allowing ourselves to simply be human. Night fell, and the deepening darkness brought with it an unsettling sense of safety. We were together, and everything that had once felt so impossibly distant now seemed within reach. Olivia shifted a little closer, and the unspoken tension between us became a palpable hum. "You make me feel like I can be more than just the marketing director," she said. And the gaze we exchanged in that moment spoke volumes more than words ever could. The air thrummed with electricity, and without a second thought, I pulled her closer, our hands instinctively intertwined, the casual touch deepening into something profound. The warmth of her body pressed against mine was a silent confirmation that we were indeed in this journey together, and the formidable walls we'd erected crumbled to dust. The kiss we shared was a heady blend of relief and discovery, and, in that instant, I realized everything that had held me back from truly opening up to her dissolved. Sometimes, it's in vulnerability we find the strength to love, echoed in my mind as, for the very first time, I allowed myself to truly feel the intricate tapestry of our connection. What had begun as a relationship marked by fear and insecurity was now blossoming into something exquisitely beautiful. On that deserted island, far removed from all expectations and obligations, we were simply Ethan and Olivia, two lost souls who had, against all odds, found their way home to each other. And as the night deepened, the stark uncertainty that had enveloped us began to transmute into a nascent, fragile hope. The island night had become a star-dusted enigma. The lingering warmth of the kiss still hummed on my lips, and the profound connection I had forged with Olivia felt more potent than anything I'd ever known. Yet, the stark reality of our predicament began to reassert its chilling grip. We were on a deserted island, without communication, without resources, and what might have been a moment of unadulterated bliss was now inextricably woven with the gnawing tension of the unknown. As the night wore on, we sat in silence, watching the gentle caress of the waves against the shore. The rhythmic lullaby of the sea offered a peculiar solace, and for a fleeting moment it felt as though the outside world had ceased to exist. Olivia looked at me, her eyes, liquid pools reflecting the moon's ethereal glow. "What are you thinking, Ethan?" she asked, her voice a mere wisp of a whisper. "I'm thinking about how utterly surreal this all feels," I replied. "How a single fleeting moment can utterly recalibrate everything we've ever believed about ourselves, about each other." The quiet settled between us once more, and for a beat, it felt as though it was just she and I, suspended in our individual reveries. "I always thought I needed to be strong, that displaying vulnerability was a cardinal weakness," Olivia said, her voice fracturing slightly. "But here with you, I feel an intoxicating liberation to truly be myself." My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs when she said that. The woman I had idolized, who always projected such an unyielding, impenetrable facade, was laying bare her truth to me, and in that moment I realized her exposed vulnerability was the undeniable key to unlocking the true depth of our bond. "I feel the same way," I confessed, a nascent courage blooming within me. I had always been shackled by the fear of inadequacy, of perpetually falling short of expectations. But out here, Stripped of everything familiar, it felt as though we could finally truly see and understand one another. The gaze we exchanged was heavy with unspoken meaning. It was as if, for the very first time, we were truly seeing the unvarnished self beneath the carefully constructed ramparts we had both habitually erected. As we talked, a storm began forming on the horizon. The wind blew harder, and dark clouds quickly approached. Despite the changing weather, I couldn't feel more connected to Olivia. Together, we decided to build a makeshift shelter to protect ourselves from the storm. The teamwork felt natural and even fun, a reflection of the new dynamic between us. "If we must spend the night here, at least let it be comfortable," Olivia joked, her laugh echoing in the rising wind. The tension of our predicament dissipated, and as we worked, our intimacy only deepened. I saw her not just as my boss, but as someone with whom I longed to share not only vulnerability, but life itself. The storm finally arrived, rain beginning to fall in torrents. We sheltered under what we could improvise, but water soon slid down our bodies. Olivia was so near, the situation's adrenaline making my heart race. The scent of rain mixed with sea salt was intoxicating, and even amid the chaos, there was a sense of protection. As the storm peaked, the intense rain and lightning cutting the sky created a dramatic scene. I pulled Olivia closer, holding her in my arms. "Stay here, I will protect you," I said, feeling the storm's strength mirrored by my desire to keep her safe. The fear of losing that moment, of losing Olivia, was overwhelming. "What are you doing, Ethan?" Olivia asked, looking deep into my eyes, challenging me to be true. "You don't need to be the hero. You can be vulnerable too." Her words pierced me like a knife. She was right. I wanted to be more than an assistant, more than a man hiding behind a brave mask. I wanted to be her partner. "I don't just want to be the hero. I want to be your equal, Olivia," I replied, the sincerity in my voice breaking all remaining barriers. "I want you to know I see you. Not just the strong woman everyone admires, but the person who has her own insecurities and fears." Deal. What began as an external storm now became an internal tempest, a maelstrom of feelings I couldn't contain. Olivia's gaze softened, and the tension between us transmuted into something palpable and beautiful. "Ethan, sometimes I feel so alone, even surrounded by people. I always believed that love and success couldn't coexist. Now, here with you, I realize I can want both," she said, her voice trembling with raw emotion. The kiss that followed was unlike the one before. It wasn't just passion. It was an affirmation of everything we were discovering together. Amidst the storm, under the torrential rain, I pulled her closer. Our lips met in a moment that seemed to freeze time. Water streamed down our skin, but the heat between us was so intense that nothing else seemed to matter. When the storm finally began to subside, the silence that followed was almost surreal. We were drenched, but looking into each other's eyes, I realized we were more than just two people lost on a deserted island. We were two souls who had found each other in a moment of vulnerability, ready to face whatever came next. The storm may have been terrifying, but it brought us something we never could have achieved in our previous world. A true connection, a mutual understanding. And as the water stopped falling and the sky began to clear, the imminent sense that we were just beginning something new and profound enveloped us. The island, which once seemed a place of despair, now transformed into a refuge of hope and love. That night, under the stars that began to shine again, I knew that, regardless of what happened next, we would be able to face it together. The journey was just beginning, and together we were stronger than we could ever imagine. The vulnerability we shared was not a sign of weakness, but the true strength that bound us. The sun rose radiantly, spreading its light across the island and dispelling the shadows the previous night had brought. The storm was gone, but it left a trail of uncertainties in my mind. Olivia and I had grown closer, but the reality of being alone on a deserted island still weighed on our shoulders. With daylight, the adrenaline from the previous night began to morph into a new anxiety. What would we do now? How would we deal with the consequences of what had occurred between us? After an improvised coffee, made with filtered water and some fruits we found, we began to discuss the next steps. We need to find a way to signal for rescue. We have to have a plan, I suggested, trying to bring rationality back to our situation. Olivia nodded, but the expression on her face was one of hesitation. It was as if the words that were once so easy to utter now carried a different weight. Ethan, there's a part of me that feels so good here, away from everything. I never thought I could find a connection so true, so pure, she said, looking out at the horizon. My heart quickened at her words. What once seemed merely an escape now transformed into a reflection on what we wanted in our lives and, more importantly, from each other. I feel it too, Olivia, but we can't ignore that we have responsibilities and lives out there, I replied, trying to be practical. The thought of returning to the office, to the pressure and expectations, felt painful. I didn't want to lose what we had built here, far from the criticisms and distances that separated us. The idea of Olivia going back to being just my boss made me uneasy. We decided to explore the island together, an act that transformed into a new adventure. We walked along deserted beaches, climbed hills, and found a small, freshwater lagoon. As we explored, the closeness we had forged during the storm seemed to envelop us again. Every glance, every casual touch of the hand we exchanged was a silent affirmation of the connection we had built. At one point, as we rested in the shade of a tree, Olivia looked at me and said, "I don't want this to end when we go back, the way I've felt here with you. This is real." Her words were an invitation, but also a challenge. What exactly did she want us to do with this? "I want this to last, Olivia, but you know we have a world out there that doesn't make things easy. What will we do with our relationship? How will we be seen? You're the director, and I'm the assistant. We can't simply ignore the consequences," I said, the tension between us returning. The truth was, I wanted more than just a fleeting romance. I wanted a meaningful relationship, but the fear of repercussions haunted me. She sighed, and the expression on her face changed. "I know. I've always been so focused on my career, on being respected, that I never stopped to think about what I truly want. And yet here I am, wishing this wouldn't end. I don't want to lose you," Olivia replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. "And I don't want to lose you." The silence between us was heavy with unspoken feelings. I was in love with Olivia, but the idea of dealing with what that meant in real life terrified me. Finally, after a week, we spotted a boat in the distance. My heart pounded in my chest, and adrenaline surged through us. It was a sign of hope, and the idea of returning to civilization was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the anticipation of being rescued grew, the reality of what that meant for us also drew nearer. When the boat approached, we noticed we were surrounded by other members of the team who had been looking for us. The relief on their faces was visible, and for a moment joy took over. But the tension that had been between Olivia and me returned. The time to face our lives and what we had experienced was about to arrive. As soon as we boarded the boat and pulled away from the island, I looked at Olivia. She was so beautiful, her hair disheveled, her face lit by the sun. But there was a shadow in her eyes I couldn't ignore. "We need to talk about this, right?" she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, absolutely. We need to be clear about what we want and what this means for us," I replied, though I knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. When we finally arrived back at the office, the real world reasserted itself. Responsibilities, obligations, and social pressures enveloped us. The atmosphere was charged with expectation, and what had once felt like a safe haven now felt like a minefield of uncertainties. The first few weeks after the rescue were tumultuous. The tension between Olivia and me was palpable, but the need to remain discreet and professional was even greater. Our interactions were punctuated by furtive glances and quick smiles, yet there was a latent fear that everything could crumble at any moment. Our colleagues started to notice the change in us. Comments began to surface, and the pressure mounted. "You two have been spending a lot of time together, haven't you?" a colleague insinuated in a meeting. Olivia's gaze hardened, and my heart sank. One evening, while discussing a project in her office, I couldn't contain the pressure any longer. "Olivia, we need to talk about what we're doing. It's unsustainable, and the tension is killing us," I said, frustration seeping into my voice. She looked at me, her eyes filled with determination. "I know, and I want this to work, I really do. But we need to be clear about what we're willing to sacrifice and what this means for our careers," Olivia replied, the sincerity in her words breaking down barriers that had seemed insurmountable. "I want you, Olivia. I want more than an escape, but I can't just be a secret." The silence that followed was heavy, and the truth of what we were experiencing settled between us. "Maybe we should acknowledge what we have," she said, and my heart raced. "I don't want to hide anymore. What we have is real, and I can't live in fear any longer." The decision lay before us, and the path ahead was uncertain. But just as on the island, the vulnerability we shared became our greatest strength. And as the future unfolded before us, we knew that together we were stronger than any challenge we might face. The decision was made, and the conversation that had been postponed grew increasingly urgent. Olivia and I knew we could no longer live with the weight of the secret. What we had experienced on the island had transformed our relationship in a way we couldn't ignore. There was an expectation in the air, a kind of electricity surrounding us, and that energy could not be contained much longer. The following week, we sat in a coffee shop near the office, far from the curious eyes of colleagues. The coffee was hot, but the tension between us felt even more intense. Olivia looked around as if to confirm no one was paying attention, and then, with renewed determination, she said, "Ethan, I want people to know what we have. I want the world to see that we are more than just a boss and an assistant. I don't want to hide this anymore." My heart pounded. Olivia's desire echoed in my chest like a drum, but the reality of our environment made me hesitate. "Olivia, you know this could have consequences. You are a respected director, and I am just an assistant. We cannot ignore that." My tone was cautious, but the truth was I wanted, more than anything, for what we were building to be recognized. "I am willing to take that risk," she said, the passion in her voice resonating within me. "I want people to know that it's possible to have a successful career and a relationship. We don't need to hide. I don't want you to feel like a secret." Olivia was right. The idea of continuing to live as if we were just colleagues, when the truth was that we were in love, was unsustainable. I wanted to support her decision, but my fear of repercussions was still strong. What if this affects your career? What if people don't accept it? What if we become the target of gossip? The words came out with an urgency I couldn't control. "If that happens, then so be it. But I don't want to lose you because of what others think. I've spent too much time worrying about other people's opinions. We need to be brave, both in love and in our careers. Are you with me?" The intensity of her gaze made me want to shout yes, that I was with her, but the weight of reality still lingered. "Yes, I'm with you," I said, feeling the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders. "We just need to be careful. We can't let this become a distraction at work." That same afternoon, Olivia organized a meeting with the team. The atmosphere was tense, and everyone could feel the expectation in the air. When she stood up to speak, I noticed her nervousness. The confident demeanor she always displayed faltered for an instant. I watched her, hoping she knew how much I supported her. I want everyone to know that Ethan and I are more than just colleagues. We are in a relationship, and this will not affect the quality of our work. The reactions were mixed. Some people seemed surprised, while others whispered amongst themselves. But to my surprise, there was no open criticism. Olivia remained steadfast, and her courage inspired me. Her courage made me feel that perhaps I could be strong too. I expect everyone to respect our relationship and our professionalism. What we have is real, and I will not allow it to become an obstacle. I am here to work and to lead, just as I always have been. The resolve in her voice was contagious, and I felt a positive energy beginning to spread through the room. After the meeting, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Some colleagues came to congratulate us, others simply offered a smile. The air wasn't quite what it had been before, but it was far from hostile. Olivia and I exchanged a silent, understanding glance, as if we had just navigated a crucial test. In the days that followed, the tension dissipated somewhat, though the conversations persisted. Some people remained curious, but gradually the news became part of the office's daily rhythm. The most important thing was that Olivia and I were together, and that gave us a renewed strength. Still, the pressure to balance personal and professional lives was a constant challenge. Sometimes the small interactions we shared throughout the day were accompanied by a fear that someone was watching us. The dread of becoming fodder for office whispers still lingered, but there was something stronger that bound us, the conviction that we were doing the right thing. One evening, as we worked late on a project, Olivia turned to me and said, "I don't regret speaking about us. The freedom I feel now is greater than any fear I might harbor." The sincerity in her voice made me feel that no matter what unfolded, we were ready to face any challenge together. I don't regret it either. What we have is special, and I don't want to lose that because of other people, I replied. That moment of shared vulnerability and honesty drew us even closer. Over time, our relationship solidified, and what once felt like a barrier transformed into a pillar in our lives. The way we worked together, the support we offered one another, the understanding we shared, all of it became a strength that helped us prosper, both personally and professionally. And amidst meetings and projects, we discovered that true love wasn't an obstacle to success, but rather the very force that propelled us to reach new horizons. What once seemed like a challenge now became a fresh perspective on life and work. So, as we navigated the waters of our new reality, we knew that, together, we were stronger than any challenge we might face. The love we had cultivated amidst vulnerability and courage now became the solid foundation upon which we would build our future. Months had passed since we decided to go public with our relationship. Olivia and I grew closer, and what began as an uncertain journey on the island had now become a daily life filled with love and understanding. The workplace, once a battlefield of insecurities and expectations, transformed into a space where I could truly be myself, and where Olivia was more than just a boss. She was my partner. During that time, the dynamic between us had stabilized. The whispers among the team had quieted, and most colleagues had accepted us. There was a mutual respect, and conversations that were once avoided now felt natural. What once felt like a precious secret began to be celebrated, and our relationship became an example that love and ambition truly could coexist. One morning, as we were having coffee at our favorite spot, Olivia looked at me with a glint in her eyes. "Ethan, I truly couldn't have done this without you. You made me understand that I can be both strong and vulnerable at the same time," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The warmth of her words enveloped me like an embrace. I knew there was something special between us, but hearing it from her made everything feel even more real. "And you showed me that it's possible to share the weight of responsibility," I responded, a smile spreading across my face. "I've learned that I don't need to be perfect to be part of something greater." The warm coffee and the soft morning light created a cozy atmosphere, and I felt utterly at home. With the certainty that our relationship was firm, we decided to take a step forward. Olivia began to consider a promotion, something she'd been pondering for a long time. "I'm thinking of applying for a higher position. I've always wanted to do this, but I was afraid of how it would be perceived," she confessed, the insecurity resonating in her words. "You're more than capable, Olivia. You've always been the best choice for it," I encouraged her, feeling a surge of pride. "And now, with everything we've been through, you know you can count on me." The look we exchanged was one of profound understanding. Just as she had supported me, I was determined to support her in this new chapter. The following weeks were marked by a frenzy of work. Olivia prepared for the presentation of her candidacy, and I helped her review her materials. The pressure was there, but there was a new lightness in her demeanor. She was determined, and the passion behind her ambition was contagious. Finally, the day of the presentation arrived. The auditorium was filled with colleagues and superiors, and I was there, sitting in the front row, my heart thrumming. Olivia stepped onto the stage, and her confidence was palpable. As I looked at her, I saw not just the woman I loved, but a leader ready to conquer what she had always desired. The presentation was a triumph. Olivia spoke with undeniable passion, pouring out her vision and ideas, and when she concluded, the room erupted in applause. The incandescent joy in her smile illuminated the entire space. I knew with quiet certainty she hadn't just secured the position. She had profoundly won the trust and admiration of all around her. When the meeting finally broke, Olivia's gaze found mine, and the pure joy in her eyes was infectious. "I did it, Ethan, I did it!" She launched herself into my arms, a tight embrace brimming with raw emotion. Her happiness enveloped me, confirming that fragile, precious feeling. We were building something extraordinary together. "I knew you would," I murmured, my smile mirroring hers. "You deserve every bit of this, and so much more." Her look, a tender blend of gratitude and deepening love, pulled me closer. In that suspended moment, I understood completely. Love and success weren't merely compatible. They were beautifully symbiotic, each nourishing the other. With her new role, Olivia blossomed into an even more respected and admired leader, and our relationship deepened in tandem. The love we had painstakingly nurtured through shared vulnerabilities now stood as an unwavering pillar of strength, propelling us toward new horizons, both in our personal lives and our intertwined professional aspirations. And as we walked forward, side by side, poised to meet whatever the future held, I knew, with a certainty deep in my bones, that together we were so much more than just a couple. We were an unstoppable force, a team ready to conquer our own world. True love, I realized, wasn't an impediment to ambition, but the very fuel that allowed us to burn brighter, bolder, more intensely than ever before.